Welcome back, everybody. As you can see, I have my beautiful wife here, Morgan. We're going to be doing a joint review on The Choosing by Rachelle Dekker. This is actually the eldest daughter of Ted Dekker. If you've read any of his stuff, it's actually how I found out about this. I follow him, I think, on Facebook, actually, and he was doing some promoting for his daughter, and of course, since she was related to Ted Dekker, we decided we both wanted to read it. This we actually got from the library, and it's considered science fiction, even though we both kind of disagree with that, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't classify. I can see why someone would classify it as science fiction, but I would not classify it as science
Someone
fiction.
who doesn't know very much. We both kind of agreed it's a lot more dystopian than anything.
Mm-hmm.
The book sets place, of course, in the future, and basically what's happened is society has collapsed, and what's left of it has reformed around this one guy who's basically claimed that God spoke to him and him alone, and gave him basically a version of the Bible that's called the Veritas, which is the truth in Latin. And he forms a very unjust, very patriarchal society around that. And this is like 2 or 3 generations later. And all the positions that he creates are passed down through birth, because we hadn't tried that before or anything. So this book starts, and everything in this culture for younger men and women is based around the choosing. Basically, their entire childhoods and up until the point that they're 17 is based on getting them ready for this event called the choosing. And basically what the choosing is where men get to basically have their pick of women, and they get to choose them, or asked to marry them. There are 2 groups in this society that are not married. The City Watch are basically the police/military, which is comprised of men who have chosen not to marry. And then you have Lents, which are women who have been unchosen and are basically deemed unworthy, and they fill all the jobs in society that no one else wants. The idea of being unchosen basically means you're not worthy, that no one wanted you, and then you get to live your life in exile.
And they teach that from a young age, because there's a certain class of women who basically are groomed from a young age so that they will be chosen, because their parents have the money to go through the appropriate teachings. They do all this stuff, but there's these 6 truths that they're taught from a very young age, and all of them are your whole life is leading up to this choosing. So that's what, so it's ingrained into them that your worth is determined by being chosen. You're not worth anything unless you're chosen, is what's drilled into their heads from a super young age.
And this book centers around the main character, Carrington, who is 17. The book picks up with her right after her choosing, in which she was not chosen. And it follows her trying to deal with the fact, because she was considered unattractive, very smart. Everyone expected her to be chosen, and to be chosen fairly highly. And then for whatever reason, it didn't happen. She has basically been told for the last 17, or the first and only 17 years of her life, that her entire worth is based around
being
chosen, and suddenly she's not. So you can kind of imagine what that would do to a young person's self-esteem.
And she spends the first portion of the book basically trying to figure out where she went wrong. And was her mother's first reaction whenever she found out that her daughter didn't get chosen. Well, what did you do wrong? How did you do it? Let's analyze this. So she spends the entire first half of the book thinking, well, I did something wrong, so I deserve to be here. I deserve to be deemed a worthless part of society. I deserve to be doing these menial tasks, etc., etc. Which is really hard.
Even though that Carrington had been taught that basically not being chosen was the worst thing that could happen, once she's not chosen and she's taken to what's called the stacks, where all the Lents live, basically cut off from society, she's basically told she's now supposed to be happy that she's there, and she's supposed to do this work that no one else wants. She's basically running maintenance on a food compactor, recycler.
It's so gross. It all of that.
Basically a large garbage disposal.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Because it doesn't convert it into something that can be used for energy or whatever. They use it to fuel stuff.
Well, they recycle as much food as they can.
Yeah. So she takes the old food waste and dumps it into the machines, and it spits out stuff that's gross.
Mm-hmm. The bulk of the story is Carrington trying to come to terms with not only what's happened to her, but also with how this society views her, and really, I would say probably all women in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's specifically dealing with her, but she encounters several women over the course of the book who are also Lints, and some who are not, who have not yet been chosen or have not had their choosing ceremony or whatever. And it is kind of, yeah, about how all of them are feeling and how all of them how all of them think about the system and the choosing and the world that they live in and how each of them are dealing with it. Yeah.
While at the same time, there's a serial killer of sorts who's preying on Lints for some weird reason, and that's probably the most Dekker-esque part of the book, even though whereas if this was like a Ted Dekker book, that would probably compose 80 to 90% of the book, whereas in this book it's 15-20% of the story.
Not very much.
So it definitely has a little bit of a horror / psychological thriller element to it, even though it's not the main part of the story.
Over the top.
A couple of other big players in this include Remco and Helms, who are two city watch guards, city watchmen, I guess. Remco is specifically tasked with investigating the Lint murders and trying to determine what happens. Larkin is also a fellow Lint who kind of befriends Carrington. Larkin is a little bit different from everyone else, basically because she's been sneaking outside of the city, which is of course against the laws in the society. You're not supposed to leave the protective walls of the society, but she's been venturing outside the walls to hear this guy Aaron speak, and Aaron speaks this radically different message that your worth is not dictated by who you are or who chose you or what you do or anything like that, but from the fact that basically you're accepted for who you are, and that who you are is enough, which is very much in opposition of the message that the society, that the authority is like the governing group, that it's very much opposed to the authority's message, which is that everything you do is supposed to help the society, and therefore if you're no help or no use to society, you're basically worthless.
It was really good. I'm a big Ted Dekker fan, which is probably the main reason why I picked up the book.
It's definitely that for me.
Yeah. But I also, at the same time, I feel like whenever the child of someone famous, acts or publishes a book or whatever, you're kind of like, you don't really know what to expect because, they may not be very good because whatever. But this was wonderful. It surpassed all my expectations. It was really well done. The concept is something that I think is so relevant to everyone. It is technically Christian fiction, but it's not preachy, which a lot of Christian fiction can be. It's just very relevant, I think, to anyone because, I think the message and what it's trying to talk about is really good.
Yeah, and any of the Bible that's actually quoted is actually quoted by the bad guys and has been twisted to try and subjugate and control people. So, yeah, like you said, it's not very preachy at all. I thought it was very, very well written. Just because she's the daughter of a famous author, I figured she could have gotten any book published, no matter how crap it was. Yeah. And part of me, I wasn't expecting it to be crap, but I knew it could be. But this was very well written. The story was pretty simple. She never goes too in-depth into the society that they've created. It's just kind of broad strokes in creating the world, which I think actually worked for this book. It's written to be a very compelling read. It definitely sucks you in. I stayed up till 2:30 one morning to finish this, which only happened because I didn't have work the following day. But it's been a long time since I've done that with a book. The last couple hundred pages, I did not want to put this book down at all. It was very compelling. It was very exciting. The story moved along really well. The characters were all very well written. None of the characters stood out in a huge way, but all the characters fulfilled their purpose very well.
I thought Remco stood out in a huge way.
I did.
He was awesome. I don't want to say too much on the review, but you should just read it for Remco because he was perfect. There was just I'm a huge romance reader. and Ben is not. But I feel like it was not a romance book by any stretch of the imagination, but there was just enough of it to get that little, like, oh, so-and-so is gonna get together with so-and-so. Like, that part was really cool. But Remco is amazing. You should read it just for Remco, because, yes.
And one of the things I like about Remco is that he actually has a pretty bad stutter, so most of the book he avoids speaking as much as possible. Therefore, you get to know his character through what he does more than what he says, and I think that's actually a really cool ploy to use to develop a character, because you're able to develop a character without him having a lot of quote-unquote screen time, or I guess in the book's case, page time. And yes, there is a big romantic element in this book, and as she said, well, it's big for me, but it wasn't too big. It definitely worked within this book. There was the almost cult-like element to it, which is very infuriating. It fulfilled its purpose. Its purpose was to get you mad and to get you frustrated, and it played its part very well. The book ended not quite like I was expecting, but it ended well. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it was a good ending, but it was not, like, satisfying. Does that make sense? It was like, I want more.
Which works out well because this is the first book in a series. I can't even remember what the series is called.
The Seer.
The Seer.
That's what the series is called.
That's right.
The Seer Chronicles.
Weird and random because it's just mentioned like one time in the book at the very end, almost in passing. But so this is the first. This second book is supposed to be published in the spring of 2016. This was published in I think May of this year, June.
Pretty sure it was June. Was it May?
I think it was the very end of May.
A couple of months ago.
Yeah. So she's going to be publishing them about once a year. I, for one, am very excited to see what she's going to do with this series. I think she laid a pretty good foundation. I'm curious to see if she's going to delve further into like the world building aspect, which I don't think will happen with book 2.
I think it could happen with book 2.
It's definitely possible.
It was so well done, but there were definitely parts of it that you could tell it was a first book. So I think that as she keeps writing, it's just going to get better.
I was very impressed with her potential for this being a first book. It was still very much enjoyable. I don't think anyone would regret this if they picked it up and read it. So good. I would definitely suggest it. I would give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars.
I gave it a big old whopping 5 stars.
5 stars.
I loved it. 0 problems. I'm pretty loose with my 5 stars though, so.
Yeah, I would almost give it a 5 stars.
The fact that he gave it almost 5 is probably more telling than the fact that I gave it 5. I love all the books.
Yeah, but it was very enjoyable. Like I said, I can't wait for the second one to be published. She found it very enjoyable, and she can't wait for the second book to be published. So if you can't trust me, then you should at least trust her, because she's a lot better looking and cooler than I am.
So obviously I'm to be trusted.
Thank you very much for watching the review. I'd like to thank my beautiful wife for coming on and reviewing it with me. We would love to hear from you, especially if you're part of a couple and you try and read the same books, because Morgan and I do try to read the same books. Doesn't happen very often. And this is one that did happen. So if you're part of a couple and you try and read the same books, but you struggle like Morgan and I do find common interest, I think this would definitely be a potential book for y'all to check out, whoever you may be. Feel free to comment below if this is something you're interested in, or if by any chance you've read it, or if you think there would be another book that Morgan and I might be interested in reading together.
We love book suggestions. Give us suggestions.
We would definitely appreciate anything about that, or any other comment you might have. You can also like this video or subscribe to the channel. Can't promise how often Morgan will be back, but I am going to try to have her as a semi-regular occurrence on this channel because she's a lot cooler than I am. Yes, it is. But thank you for watching. We will see you next time. Bye.